By the beginning of the 4th century, Christianity was flourishing in Egypt. But as in North Africa, there were considerable debates over what to do with those who had lapsed during times of persecution. The result in Egypt was a schism between those who took a more rigorous line and those who were more moderate. One member of the rigorist party, a person who ultimately changed sides to the Catholics, was a man named Arius, who lived from 260 to 336. He was ordained a presbyter in the church in Alexandria. In 318, a controversy broke out around Arius and his views on the nature of Christ. These views owed a great deal to the great theologian Origen, a father of the church in Alexandria, who had held that the Son was of the same essence as the Father. The question was, who was Jesus, the Jesus whom Christians worshipped? There were, as we've already suggested, multiple responses concerning the relationship between the first two persons of the Trinity. Arius's controversial position was that the Logos was not eternal. He was the firstborn of creation. But what this meant was that only God the Father is eternal, and that there was a time when the Son was not. This brought Arius into conflict with his bishop in Alexandria, and he was banished after a synod. Arius went to Nicomedia, where under the Emperor Licinius he resided, and there became connected to the person of Eusebius. Eusebius, who was bishop of Nicomedia and a writer, took up Arius's cause. And within a short period of time, much of the Eastern Church became embroiled in a controversy and was badly divided. The churches in Asia Minor and in Palestine largely supported Arius's views, while others rejected him as a heretic who diminished the status of Christ. Constantine, who wanted no replication of the divide that was tearing apart the North African church, sought, as we said, a path to unity. And his plan was for a council of the church, which was held in Nicaea in the year 325. Here we see a modern representation of Constantine at the council, here below the figure of Arius. While over here from a 9th century Italian book of canon law, we have Constantine burning the books of Arius, listed here as heretici, Ariani, and damnati. Constantine became the great defender of the statements of Nicaea on the nature of Christ. And Council at Nicaea was the first ecumenical council. Over 300 bishops attended. But Arius, who was a presbyter, also was there. One of only a few bishops in this collection came from the West. But at the solemn opening, Constantine urged the bishops to achieve unity and peace. The creed proposed for the council rejected Arianism by affirming that the Son is of one substance with the Father. It denied that Christ was in any way inferior to the Father. And here we have from the 6th century one of the oldest extant copies of the creed on a papyrus. The council, which brought together all of the bishops, signed this creed, which pleased Constantine greatly. Other issues were also resolved, such as how Easter should be calculated. And there were legislation for the discipline of the church. The council also enhanced the position of the great cities of Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch as the major centers of the church. They would soon be joined by Constantinople. Yet, as the institutional structures of the church were being worked out in the 4th century, the Arian controversy became ever more inflamed. Nicaea did not bring it to an end, and it would dominate the 4th century church. The Nicene Creed became the standard of orthodoxy in the church. But what became evident quickly was that the formulation on the nature of the relationship between the Father and the Son was still variously interpreted. Events took a sharp turn when Athanasius became Bishop of Alexandria and dedicated himself to the removal or extirpation of heresy. He refused to be reconciled with Arius, even though he was told that Arius had signed the Nicene Creed and was commanded to be reconciled by the emperor. Athanasius, for his behavior, was excommunicated and sent to Gaul. But under Constantine's successors, his sons, who divided the empire, controversy only grew, becoming ever more bitter, because this question was not one simply of abstract theology. It exposed a fundamental division between Rome and the Eastern churches. Rome, claiming its precedence, assumed that the Greek churches represented the Arian heresy. Roman claims to superior position also greatly disturbed and infuriated those Greek churches. Church politics surrounding this whole debate about the relationship of the Father and the Son, the nature of the Trinity, was deeply intertwined with imperial politics, and schism loomed. In 346, Athanasius returned to Alexandria and would spend the next 10 years dedicated to the struggle against the heresy. Eventually, however, he was ousted in 356 and replaced by an Arian bishop. His major opponent had been no one less than the figure of Emperor Constantius and his Arian advisors. The Arian struggle lasted through the 4th century, as with Athanasius as the leading proponent of Nicene theology, the theology of homoousios, of one substance. As I said, it was not simply a rarefied theological debate, but a serious division that was emerging between the East and the West. Those theologians in the West found themselves having to defend the Nicene Creed. The story is extraordinarily complex and involves a whole range of characters, with endless twists and turns. But it was a church that was ultimately plagued by this division and politics. Once more resolution was sought, this time by the Emperor Theodosius, who in 381 summoned a large council to Constantinople, although no representatives came from Rome. Gregory of Nazianzus, who was a supporter of the Nicene formula, was appointed Bishop of Constantinople, although he was forced to resign in a storm of controversy to be replaced by another. Nevertheless, the Council of 381 affirmed the Nicene formulation of 325, that Father and Son were identical in essence. The Son is begotten by the Father, and the Spirit proceeds from the Father. The Council also enhanced the status of Constantinople itself, declaring it to be the Second Rome. The Council of Nicaea put an end to Arian attempts to establish a hold on the church. Arianism, however, would survive, for example, among the Goths who had been converted to Christianity by Arian missionaries. But in many respects, its time had passed. It had arisen amongst those who had sought to make the faith comprehensible, acceptable to the educated public of the 4th century. The battle had been crucial to the establishment of an imperial theology and to the foundation of the lines between orthodoxy and heresy. But the question of who was Jesus Christ remained within the church to be resolved.